past with the EuroLeague and are close with many of their clubs and are appreciative of the effort that's gone into growing basketball throughout Europe. I'd say from the NBA standpoint, we continue to explore what opportunities may exist to help continue to develop the basketball infrastructure here. We have, in the past, I've talked about our exploration of a potential league here. I'd say to the extent we're looking at that opportunity, it would just be one piece of a larger approach to basketball throughout Europe. I mean, anything we would do would include a partnership with FIBA, although there are no agreements in place right now. We're still in exploratory stage, but I would say anything we've done globally has been with FIBA as our partner, as, for example, the league that we're operating in Africa right now. But we've used this opportunity here over the last few days. Mark Tatum, the Deputy Commissioner, is here, who oversees international, to have meetings with many different stakeholders. And those stakeholders include leaders of clubs, it includes FIBA, it includes media companies, traditional sports sponsors, just to best understand the landscape here and to see what the opportunity may be. So, as I said, we have no agreements in place. We're not ready to make any additional announcements, and we'll continue to learn all we can and to see if there is a path to move forward. I'll just say I joined the NBA right before the famous Dream Team in 1992 and have been closely watching the development of European basketball over those many years. And while Europe continues to develop some of the very best players in the world, many of our most recent MVPs, of course, are European, we think that the commercial opportunity has not kept pace with the growth of the game. And what we do at the NBA is we run leagues. We, of course, run the WNBA. We have the league in Africa I mentioned. We have the G League. We have a 2K video league. So we operate 5 different leagues, and we think it's an expertise we have. And so we are looking very closely to see if there's an opportunity to professionalize the game to another level here, to create a larger commercial opportunity, and not just because commercial opportunity suggests you can grow revenue, but because we believe that with markets, if you can create proper incentives, you can get significant additional investment, and ultimately that's the way to grow the game at all levels. So that's what we're continuing to look at right now.
Next question is on the right side, third row back and third person in.
Hi, Adam. Tim Reynolds with the AP. How are you? Good to see you.
Hey, Tim. Good to see you.
Hi, Adam. 2 years ago at this game, Victor was coming as a fan, and everyone knew he would be the #1 pick a few months later, and you got asked a lot of questions that night about Victor, and you were very cautious about not heaping too much pressure or expectation on then a 19-year-old shoulders. When you look back to whatever your private thoughts were at that point, has he exceeded or matched, or I guess how has the reality sort of matched whatever you thought would be possible when Victor came to the NBA? Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. I would say Victor's exceeded my expectations only because, having been with the league for a long time, we've seen lots of projected #1 picks who did or didn't go #1, but even when they went #1, maybe due to no fault of their own or because of an injury or things just didn't work out, didn't meet the high expectations people had of them. So I tried to stay level-headed in terms of what the potential is for a player. Of course, in the case with Victor, there was a body of work, even when we were back then in Paris, where you could see, we were televising on NBA TV his club games. We were familiar with him. I had had the opportunity to spend time with him. There was never a doubt in my mind in terms of Victor's character, his motivation, his drive, his intelligence. All those things are very apparent when you talk to him. I'd say now all of those qualities being translated into the NBA game. We didn't know at that time he was going to be with the San Antonio Spurs, which again, we would have all been happy from the league standpoint with whatever club he had gone to. But there, as I mentioned earlier with R.C. Buford and Coach Pop, there were, a GM and a coach who had fantastic experience developing international players, developing big men. So I think that worked out very well. I think he's received excellent support there. And again, like you never know with these things. It's like interviewing people for jobs. Everyone in this room has hired someone for a job thinking that they were the perfect person and the candidate. And then when then when he or she took the job, you quickly realize, well, maybe they weren't the right fit. I think in the case of Victor, as I said, he's exceeded my expectations. One, just by his play on the floor, he's demonstrated that, but also in terms of his desire to engage with fans. I mean, that example I used about him playing chess at Washington Square Park, that was something he chose to do. The league had nothing to do with that, but it was, I think he loves to engage with people. He loves people. And we're also seeing what an incredible work ethic he has. I mean, and I love the fact that now people are actually talking about his defense. I mean, think about that, something that he really is focused on, and what a sign of a great player. I mean, everybody clearly easily sees offense statistics, but missed defense in a lot of cases. So, as I said, I'm very happy with him, but even now I'm always still being a little bit cautious. Essentially I was just looking, I think he just turned 21 and LeBron just turned 40. So there's the opportunity for 19 years of excellence. So I'm looking forward to seeing him play tonight and Saturday, and I would just say it's a pleasure to be part of a league with Victor Wembanyama.
Next question's on the left, second row, second person in from the aisle.
Hello, Tobias Enke from German Basket Magazine. Adam, basketball in Germany as a sport has benefited from recent success like the World Cup and, of course, from the German NBA players. So it's not surprising that we get asked a lot about potential NBA game in Germany. What message do you have for German basketball fans?
Stay tuned. We're looking very closely at potentially bringing a regular season game to Germany. It's something that our office in Europe is concentrating on at this precise time.
Next question is on the right, second row, third person in.
Hey, Adam.
Hey, welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Fellow New Yorker.
Yes. I wanted to come back to the discussions about the European League. You said you've been meeting with stakeholders this week. What has the tenor of their reactions been? What kind of feedback have you been getting?
The tenor of the meetings have been very positive. And it's not anti-anybody or anti-any other organization, but I think what we're hearing is that when they look at the success, I'll say soccer just so I don't confuse anybody, because that's what we call it in the States, when they look at the tremendous success of soccer globally, but in Europe as well, and they sort of, most people in the meeting, they put one hand here, and they say that's the commercial success of soccer, and then they put their other hand here, and they say that's where basketball currently stands. And so when we look at that opportunity, and these potential partners do as well, what they're telling us is they believe that from a commercial standpoint, in terms of the networks they represent or are part of, or those consumer companies that they represent, that they think there's a desire to connect with consumers, particularly young consumers, which is generally the fan base of the NBA, that they think that the market is ready to do more in this sport. I'll add, what is I'm hearing back from people, it's something I know by virtue of being part of the NBA. The NBA is a unique league in my mind in that, of course, we represent the best basketball, and with the WNBA, the best women's basketball, but it's also a lifestyle brand. And I think that's something that comes up in many of the meetings, that there's a strong association with music, with fashion, with culture, with art. And I think there's a real appreciation for that the NBA is even something a little bit different than basketball. This is pure basketball. And I think the way to grow this sport is to appeal to people beyond those who are hardcore basketball fans. And that's where our success has come in the United States and elsewhere. It's about the NBA brand. And I think that the notion we've heard back is that if you can bring those elements of the NBA brand and bring those to Europe as part of some structured league potentially, we think there's a real opportunity.
All right, we're going to go to the right. It's about 6 rows back, 3 people in from the aisle.
Hi, Mr. Silver. It's Damian Karykowski from Strefa Hanasa. I'm from Poland. I would like to just ask about the new TV deal that you signed, and if you think that it can leverage some availability for Europe and for Poland as well.
You're referring to the new TV deals we did in the United States?
Yes.
Yes. So Number one, in many ways, those are global deals. 3 global companies, Disney, Comcast, NBC Universal, and Amazon. So one of the important aspects of these new television deals is it's a move from what I think of as traditional legacy television, over-the-air television, which is still very important, cable television, which in many ways is becoming less important, but then moving to streaming television. And streaming TV, which is really internet television, call it that, provides all kinds of opportunities for fans that you don't have through traditional TV. Number one, phone programming games can be viewed on your phone or whatever portable device you have. What a huge advantage when you can carry your television with you, especially when there are time zone differences, and particularly for young people who tend not to watch as much traditional television, but watch streaming services, whether that be ESPN or Peacock or Amazon or YouTube for that matter. Young people tend to watch more programming on their phone, and putting aside opportunities in social media. In addition to the availability, those new services allow for all kinds of new functionality, that unlimited numbers of languages, dialects, cameras focused on particular players, human interest information that can come up while you're watching a game, tap on a player, where's that player from, what are his statistics, et cetera, merchandising opportunities, community activities, you name it. Those are things we're very focused on. So from those deals, yes, but we're also, and maybe this goes to your question, those deals are not exclusive around the rest of the world, as we still have opportunities. Bill Koenig is here, who runs the NBA's media business, having additional conversations with broadcasters here in France and elsewhere, so that we can supplement those deals with additional programming that's more local, including, for example, these 2 games will be available on over-the-air television. I mean, we want to make sure both that we can reach the broadest number of fans, but also that we're reaching fans where they are, and particularly with young fans, that tends to be on their phones. Thank you.
Next question is going to be on the left-hand side, 3rd row back, all the way on the aisle.
Adonis Jablonskis, Basket News coach, basketnews.com. Mr. Silver, staying on that European basketball topic, yesterday when you spoke with the French media, you mentioned that the likely scenario will be an independent European league. So even though the league would be entirely new, is it possible that the participating teams will include established and well-known brands like Real Madrid, Panathinaikos, for example? And second part of the question would be regarding the new teams. Could they be soccer brand affiliates in basketball, such as PSG, Man United, Manchester City, and others? And do you think they would be able to compete financially with other top European basketball teams?
The quick answer to your question is everything is still on the table. So the potential to include existing clubs, absolutely, should there be interest. The opportunity to create sustainable competition. Yes, would we want to have a broad base of countries represented? Absolutely. I mean, that's the benefit we have now by coming in and looking at this from a blank canvas. I mean, incidentally, I recognize there's enormous history and tradition here in European basketball, and we want to respect those traditions. Obviously, the United States is used to closed leagues. Europe is used to open leagues, with promotion, relegation, et cetera. So we're looking at all those facets. But having had this long history from our operation of sports leagues, largely in the United States, a little bit elsewhere, seeing what's happened in Europe, not just in basketball, but in soccer as well, it gives us the opportunity to say, all right, let's take a fresh look. What are the most effective practices for creating a commercially viable league? And that's the process we're going through right now.
Next question is just behind him, 4th row on the left in the maroon hat.
Hello, Adam. Shay Mahmoud for a reverse basket session. With the game becoming more and more global, do you feel the need from the American fan base to find the next American faces for the NBA? For example, your fellow Duke Blue Devil, Cooper Flag. Do you think it could be one of the next faces of the league?
I'm going to build off Tim's question, and the last person I want to put pressure on is Cooper Flagg, but he looks pretty spectacular so far. I will just add, that while it's amazing to see the breadth and depth of international players coming into the NBA, 70% of our players in the NBA, of course, are still U.S. players. Could we do a better job working potentially with other youth programs in the U.S., developing U.S. players? Absolutely. I think it's something, you happen to be sitting next to Kathy Behrens from the NBA, who's very involved in that program, that we're taking a very close look, working with the NCAA, working with Nike on what more we can do to help bring elite players along, at the same time focusing on participation generally for boys and girls. And I think there's lessons to be learned from Europe, from their system in terms of development. So I'm not concerned at all about the pipeline of American players, but I think there's more we can do. And incidentally, in Europe, having some of the conversations that we've had while we were here are with some former NBA players who grew up in European systems. And as I said before, if we were to look at a league opportunity, we want to be part of a larger ecosystem. And what we've heard is there's been some significant cuts in some of the traditional nationally funded programs that have helped develop basketball. And I know that's something that our partners at FIBA are very focused on. Anything we do, they want to be supportive of the local leagues, and they want to be supportive of development programs to ensure that we're doing as good a job as we can supporting youth basketball. And just add, when I talk to the great players in the NBA, yes, you have to have incredible physical talents, but Victor's a great example of it. He had incredible training, as a youth player and was part of first-class organizations. That's necessary. I think just like, for someone like me who had the opportunity to go to great schools and be trained by David Stern and others, I don't think sports is any different. It's not an accident that these players reach these levels. And I think so the more we can do to support the ecosystem to ensure that basketball is played. And lastly, I'll say, yes, with a focus on elite sports, but just one additional word just about the wonders of sport. And this is not limited to basketball, but it's something we spend a lot of time at the NBA and WNBA, and that's just encouraging young people to be actively involved physically. With all these screens that people spend all their time looking at, you need to remind them how important it is to be physically active. And basketball happens to be one of those sports where for boys and girls, you can play it alone, you can play it 3-on-3, 5-on-5, etc. That's why I'm so encouraged by what they're doing at the Olympic movement, that getting kids active and then teaching them the values of sport, respect, responsibility, hard work, all those wonderful things that come with sport, then for the vast majority of them, or almost all of them, who will never go on to play sports at an elite level, those are the important qualities that allow them ultimately to become top-notch journalists or league executives or lawyers, doctors, etc., all those common values. So that traditionally we've had so much support from governments around the world when we brought the game and the investments to these communities, because they see well beyond the commercial opportunities. They're focused on what we can do for these communities.
Next question is me on the right-hand side, second row, 5 people in. Joe?
Joe Varden from The Athletic. I'd like to, follow up on 2 different points that you've made. One, with the European, the venture that you have been considering. Is it fair at all to say that some of the momentum has stalled on your side as far as moving towards with your own league over here? And then the other thing I wanted to follow up with is there something about European development that you think could work in the U.S.?
Joe, I usually agree with you on most things, so I'd say no, it's not fair at all to say that momentum has stalled. From what we've been doing at the league office in terms of the process we've been following, we're right on track. I'm not sure what anybody else's expectation was. Our plan all along was to spend time here this summer when we were here for the Olympics, to have a series of meetings, and we were on the ground here for roughly 2 weeks to watch basketball ourselves. Certainly all the stakeholders were here watching the Olympics, to go back, do some additional work, always knowing that we would be here for this week in January to set a set of meetings here and take advantage of that opportunity. We have an NBA board meeting late March. We'll be giving an update to our bosses in essence. So from that standpoint, we're right on track. So I don't feel that way at all. You know, I'd say in terms of what we see, remind me of the second part of your question. The development from standpoint, yeah. I think there, sure. I think that when I talk to, you know, Luka Doncic or you know, certainly Victor or Giannis, you know, other top-notch international players, and talk about the track they were on and developing as players, there's a lot that is preferable in many ways to the American system. I mean, it's an exaggeration to say it, but often people will shorthand it to say, in Europe, youth basketball, elite players, you know, practice 6 days a week and play one. In the United States, they play 6 days a week and practice one. I mean, that's not quite true. I'm looking at Joe Dumars, who's sort of shaking his head, saying, in essence, yes. I mean, I think in youth basketball in the U.S., the young players are playing too many games, and I think that there's sometimes too much of a focus on skill. It's not that they're not working as hard. They certainly, in some cases, I think they're working too hard and need to be playing more sports at once. But, you know, my feeling here is that there's something to be said when youth players are part of a singular organization, in some cases maybe 14 through 19, there's much more of an incentive to bring players along as opposed to a win-now mentality. And I think that's something that if we can bring back to the States, again, working with the NCAA, potentially working with the EYBL, the youth program that Nike runs, I think at an elite level, I think, and the data supports it, that we think some of the injuries that our young players are experiencing are overuse injuries, not because they're being too physical, but it's from the repetition of certain things, and that's why I think, like certainly Joe Dubar's generation, those players in the league also happen to be the best at every other sport in their schools because they played different sports depending on the season, and we're not necessarily going to move away from specialization, but I think there is an opportunity here using the kind of data that we now have. AI is going to be extraordinarily helpful because now when a player is injured, you can go back through AI and see every move that player made and see common patterns, what's a player doing, what necessarily led them to that injury. So the answer is we can do a better job and we can learn from European development.
We have time for 2 more questions on the
Is
third
that
row.
because my answers are so long?
No, they're great. We're going to left-hand side, 3 rows back, 5 people in, essentially in the center.
Hey,
Yes.
Adam,
Hello.
Len World, Open Court Basketball. We've been praising European basketball all night long, and it's internationally, in general, that's been growing. Like Pascal Siakam, for example, who's playing tonight here as well. Regarding the upcoming All-Star weekend, you had a new plan to attract, you know, some new viewers and to make the game more competitive. Was something like a Team USA versus Team World something you've been maybe thinking about as it is used in different European leagues as an All-Star game?
Yeah, we have explored the idea of doing a U.S. team versus a world team, and maybe we will do that one day. A couple thoughts on that. One is, as I mentioned, 30% of the league is international and the rest American players. So one, just not to say we couldn't figure out a way around this, but to the extent we want to have a fair process for picking all-stars, if you're picking half the players from a 30% pool and the other half from 70% pool, it might not be fair to the players. So that's one thing we're looking at. In addition, I want to be respectful of not just international basketball, but the incredible work that individual countries are doing. I mean, just by way of example, there's 14 NBA players from France. I mean, I could see that some international players would say, you know, that might have been the old days when it was U.S. against all of us. But, you know, we're not so bad that, you know, it's U.S. against 200 other countries, you know, that have players. So it may be, to me, a little bit of an old-fashioned concept where we come in as Americans and say, we'll take on the world. I'm not sure how well that would be received by our international players. So we're experimenting, as you mentioned, with a new format this year. You know, I haven't given up, you know, on All-Stars still being, you know, competitive, entertaining games for the fans. That's certainly not where we were this year. Hopefully, you know, we went back to the drawing board. We had direct conversations with many of the players, many of the perennial All-Stars to talk about what it is that we could put together from a competitive standpoint. And I'm optimistic this year that we landed on a formula that will work.
And the last question, we're going to go on the right-hand side, second row, 4 people in.
Okay.
Hey, Adam. You mentioned, I think, last week on a podcast, you're looking at the three-point issue. And aside from asking, what are you considering in terms of fixes, do you feel like the NBA has kind of reached an efficiency trap that baseball reached a few years ago, where teams were behaving in a way where they were trying to maximize winning, but it ultimately hurt the product themselves, and baseball took a number of measures to try to fix that? And if you feel it has, like, does the NBA need to do something small or big in that regard?
The answer is I'm not sure what we need to do as a result, but yes, I would say analytics takes sports, and to your point, it's not unique to basketball or the NBA, takes sports in a certain direction because it's a coach's and a general manager's job to win. They're not necessarily focused on the aesthetic appeal of the game, understandably. And then it's our role, and working here, Byron Spruell and Joe Dumars and Evan Wash, to work with our competition committee and say, all right, we have to balance these interests, that they're going to operate under our current rules, just as we saw in baseball, and do everything they can to win under those existing rules. And then it's on us if we need to make adjustments in those rules, because we're also looking at the aesthetic appeal of the game. I think in the case of three-point shooting, it's absolutely that the analytics have taken teams in certain directions, to the point where, one aspect in particular that concerns me, and I've heard this directly from some players, that when you get to a point where something, I think, to a great player feels a bit unnatural, and in certain cases, in that category, I would put necessarily a shot that they would otherwise take, that the coach is saying that's a bad shot because your word efficient. It's not an efficient shot to take that two-pointer. Having said all that, as Joe has said before, the game changes over time. We're in a transition now. The other thing I've learned, and this also came directly from one of our advisors, speaking of Duke, Mike Krzyzewski from Duke University, he's also said to me in our competition committee, be careful not to overreact. Sometimes as adjustments happen, teams may swing a little too far in one direction and they may pull back. One example maybe is the Boston Celtics. We're an all-time high in three-point shooting in the league, and those numbers are coming down already now midway into the season. So I want to let it marinate a bit. We happen to have a competition committee meeting on Monday of next week. We have a general manager's meeting on Tuesday. I want to get direct feedback from our teams on what they're seeing. I should add, I do find night in, night out, we're watching the best athletes in the world do things that were unthinkable to me, when I first joined the league. So I'm enjoying watching the games. Is there a tweak? I'll just add, I'm not necessarily sure it's just three-point shooting. Again, one of the things maybe that we've swung too far is on, I remember there was an era in the NBA, largely, in the 90s, where there was a sense that we had taken away some of the finesse aspects of the game. The game had become too physical. Maybe we went too far in the other direction, and we made some adjustments last year to allow defenses to be a little bit more physical, and fans responded positively to that, and I think teams did as well. Some teams may have had some concerns with exactly how that adjustment was made, but the end result, I think, has been very positive from a fan standpoint. So those are the kinds of things that we're continuing to look at, because I've seen some incredible games. I just look at those Olympic games that I was here for, USA, Serbia, USA, France, in the medal round. Many people have said to me, those are two of the best basketball games they've ever seen. It just so happens that the three-point shooting in those games were at a higher rate on average than the average we're seeing in the NBA right now. And I don't think anyone said, oh, there's too much three-point shooting in those games. So it's a beautiful game. It's an incredible game. I think that the most important part from our standpoint is ensuring there's always competitive tension on the floor. There's a physical part of it. I think that partly what fans are responding to isn't necessarily the number of feet from which the shot has been taken, but what they view as the level of difficulty. That becomes important. Does a shot look too easy to the fans? And I think fans like a certain aspect of the physical, grinding that comes with this game, and I don't think we want that to be lost. So, I have tremendous confidence in our competition committee, of my coworkers who are really expert on the game. I think it's my job to listen to the fans as well, and to ensure that what we are presenting ultimately as the NBA product has the greatest appeal possible. And so, I'm listening to the critics. I don't want to overreact, but I think there potentially are some adjustments we can make.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner. And thank you, everybody, for being here. The transcripts of this press conference will be available on NBA.com, and we hope you all enjoy the game tonight.
Yeah. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the game.